What's up, girl? So it's super late. It's super late, but it's Bible Study Sunday. And today we're talking about faith over scarcity. And it's about the prophet Isaiah and a widow who was not an Israelite. So she did not know the God of Israel. She wasn't a servant of the God of Israel, but yet she showed faith over scarcity. The prophet Isaiah showed faith over scarcity. So it's a really good lesson. It's in the book of First Kings, for chapter 17. If you have your Bibles with you, then you can follow along. It's in the book of First Kings, chapter 17. I'm talking really, really low because it's super late and I live in apartments. This is like when it's inconvenient to live in apartments. Um, because then I can't talk at like my normal tone or whatnot, but that's okay. That's why I have the mic here to kind of help with that a little bit. But in First Kings chapter 17, there was a drought going on. There was like, a famine going on type of thing. And so God had told the prophet Isaiah to go to this widow and that she would provide him with food. He said, "Go to this widow, and when you go to her, she will give you the food that you need." So it took faith for Isaiah to listen to God because he's like, "What? A widow?" Because back in the day, the men were the breadwinners. So typically, if someone was a widow, they were poor. She was a single mother, she had a son. Even in today's society, single mothers are typically lower income. Typically, I say. So if you're a single mom and you're not lower income, then you fit outside the mold, outside the box. Usually, two incomes, is higher earning incomes, right? So this woman, her husband had died. She has a son on her own, so she doesn't have a lot of money. So Isaiah, he could have been like, God, really? You're sending me to a widow, right? Like, you're sending me to a widow to get food during this drought or famine. Like, make it make sense. The math ain't mathin'. But this is where it took faith over scarcity during this time of need to lean into God and listen to God, even though it didn't make sense. And sometimes there's things that like don't make sense at the time that we receive instruction or, you know, um, X, Y, and Z, where you just have to listen and lean in, right? Um, but the actual story starts at verse 8 and then or verse 9, where it says that God told Isaiah to rise up, go to Zarephath, and he said, look, I will command a widow there to supply you with food. And then he did exactly that. He rose up during this drought, during this famine, and he went to Zarephath and he saw the widow and he told her, please bring me some water so that I can drink. Please bring me some bread. And then in verse 12, she's like, as surely as God is living, I have no bread. She's like, I am poor. She's a widow. She has no husband to be her breadwinner. She's a single mom. She has a son on her own, raising a child on her own. She said, all I have is a little bit of flour, a handful of flour, and a little bit of oil in a small jar. And that's in verse 12. And then, so then she said that she's getting ready to get some wood together so that she can, basically warm it up and make something for her and her son. And she said, and after that, that's literally all the food that I have. And then I'm going to go die. So, you know how like you know how some people say like just to be like funny or smart alecky or sarcastic that like, I'm going to go die now, like "Psh, I'm going to go die now." Like that's kind of how she was, but she was actually kind of being serious because literally all she had was this handful of flour and a tiny bit of oil in a jar. And so she's like, that's all I have. So I'm going to go make it now. We're going to eat it and then we're going to die, quite literally, because we're in this famine, we're in this drought. I have no money. I'm a widow. I'm a single parent. That's it. So then in verse 17, um, then the prophet Isaiah or Elijah. Oh goodness, I've been saying Isaiah this whole time. Sorry, guys. So major correction. I'll even have to correct my title. The prophet Elijah. Sheesh. I've been messing up this whole time. Forgive me. But in verse 18, um, Elijah said, basically, oh wait, did I scroll fast? Too fast? I think I did. I scrolled too fast. So let's go back to up to verse 13. Elijah says to the widow, "Do not be afraid. Go ahead and make the bread that you're about to make." And he said, "And bring it to me." hmm Yeah, so she doesn't know him. This is a stranger. She doesn't know him. Like, she probably knows that he's a prophet of the true God, but it's not like they were friends or anything prior. So he says, make your bread and then bring it to me, and then afterwards, after you bring it to me, then you can feed yourself and then you can feed your son. And he said, basically, if you do this, then your large jar of flour will not run out and your oil will not run dry, and God will supply you food every single day until God makes it rain on the surface of the ground. So this was an opportunity for her to either go on the faith side of things or go on the scarcity side of things. Because again, she has no breadwinner of a husband. This is a drought. This is a drought of a time. She's a single mom. Like, think about the human instinct for a second of a single mom, and you literally only have enough bread to feed yourself one last time. You have enough bread to feed your son one last time. This is crazy, right? Fix my Facebook camera here. This is crazy. And then she's like, and then after that, I'm going to go die. After I eat it, I'm going to go die. So bad. But Elijah is giving her the opportunity to stay alive, basically. And so either she's going to put faith in the prophet Elijah and that what he's saying is from the true God, or she's going to go into sink into scarcity, which I think the average person would sink into scarcity because that's just human nature. That's just human nature. But she doesn't. She doesn't sink into scarcity. She's not like, oh, well, no, I have to feed my son first. No, it says that she does just that. It says in verse 15, so she went and did just as Elijah said. And she, together with him and her household, ate for many days. Can you imagine? She literally just went from 0 to 100 on God's blessings. Like, she literally just went from having one more meal left and she was going to go die, literally, or she took the offer. She gave her food first to Elijah, then she fed herself and her husband, or fed herself and her son. And she had food for many days. Her jar never ran out of flour, and her other jar never ran out of oil. Isn't that amazing? So this situation was so easy for her that she could have gone into scarcity. Elijah could have went into scarcity because he could have been like, God, why are you sending me to a widow that's not an Israelite? This was a non-Israelite woman. She was a widow and she was a single mother. So Elijah could have sunk into scarcity mode, and this woman could have sunk into scarcity mode, but they both put their faith in God. That's just amazing to me. So then, um, next though, the trial wasn't over. The famine, the drought was not the only thing this woman was through. So she's lost her husband in death. Now she's going through this drought, and then she has to give her last meal to Elijah to show faith that God would provide more food for her. But then the next trial that she goes through is that her son got sick and then died. Ugh, your only son. That's all you have left. Isn't that sad? Like, I low key have like tears behind my eyes a little bit, but her only son dies, gets sick and dies. And that is in verse 17. And then in verse 18, um, the widow says to Elijah, "What do you have against me, O man of the true God? Have you come to remind me of my guilt and put my son to death?" But he said to her, "Give me your son." Then he took her from him, put her son in his arms, and carried him to the roof chamber where he was staying, and he laid him on his own bed. Then in verse 20, he says, "Oh God, why are you bringing harm to this widow? Why are you bringing harm to this widow with whom I am staying by putting her son to death?" And then in verse 21, he stretched himself out over the child 3 times and called out to God, "Oh Jehovah God, please let this child's life come back into him." And God listened to Elijah's request, and the life of the child came back into him, and he was revived. So then Elijah took the child and brought him down to the roof chamber and gave him back to his mother. And Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." And so we're at verse 23, and then verse 24 says, "At that the woman said to Elijah, 'Now I know that you truly are a man of God, and that Jehovah's words are really in your mouth, that are truth.'" So what's crazy is that, like, first of all, we know that she was a non-Israelite woman, and we know that no one was resurrected up until this point in the Bible. So this was the very first resurrection. So the very first resurrection was a non-Israelite. So that tells you right there, one, how God feels about people that aren't considered in the box of what, humans would say. As long as they have faith in him and put faith in him. And faith without works is dead, of course. Like, she had to put in the work of faith and whatnot, right? So, but it didn't mean anything to God that she wasn't an Israelite woman, because God can use anyone that he wants, that he so chooses, because God's name means he causes to become. So he can cause anyone to become anything that he needs them to be in order to fulfill his purpose. But yeah, so the very first resurrection in the Bible is a non-Israelite, this woman's son. But so it's just 2 really, really, really good lessons of faith over scarcity that the prophet Elijah practiced, faith over scarcity that this widow practiced, not having a husband, not having a breadwinner back in the society of her days, or even if you say our society. having a young son, having her son die, and then also she was a vessel. She was a tool that God was able to use in order to fulfill his purpose. God could have used anyone, but he chose a non-Israelite. Um, the very first resurrection in the Bible being a non-Israelite. So it definitely shows that, like how the scriptures say that God knows how to um, save his people from destruction. um, it's like God knows how to save individual people and groups of people, because he reads hearts. So he knows whether someone is a good person or not based off of um, reading their heart. So um, I don't do live prayers, but I do hope that everything is okay with your family. For the person tuning in on YouTube, um, and I can pray in private for your family. But yeah, so very, very good lessons to definitely have faith over scarcity, and to also just know that, God is a reader of heart. Whether you feel like you fit the mold, whether you feel you fit the box of what people consider to be a worshiper of God, God can use anyone he wants to fulfill his purpose. So, anyways, I hope that you guys have a great night. As always, it is faith, consistency, and hard work that's going to get you to your goals. My name is Coach Indy, and I help plus size moms, plus size nurses, plus size medical field moms to be able to lose weight without counting carbs, without cutting carbs. I just do these Sunday Bible studies for my clients, and open it up to the public. So I hope that you guys have a really good night. And remember that faith without works is dead. So you got to put in the work. Bye.